Grace and peace to you. It's Holy Monday in the life of the church as we continue to journey through this week with Jesus. The first reading for today is from the prophet Isaiah, the 42nd chapter, verses 1 through 9. This is one of those suffering servant songs of Isaiah, and though he does not identify who this person is, the church has seen the prophet speaking about Jesus. Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry out or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be crushed until he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his teaching. Thus says God, the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people upon it and spirit to those who walk in it. I am the Lord. I have called you. In righteousness I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison those who sit in darkness. I am the Lord, that is my name. My glory I give to no other, nor my praise to idols. See, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. And then the psalm is Psalm 36, verses 5 through 9. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains, your judgments are like the great deep. They save humans and animals alike, O Lord. How precious is your steadfast love, O God! All people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. Then we turn to the book of Hebrews. We're going to be reading from the 9th chapter, verses 11 through 15. But when Christ came as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy place, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls with the sprinkling of the ashes of a heifer sanctifies those who have been defiled, so that their flesh is purified, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to worship the living God? For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, because a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions under the first covenant. And then we turn to John's Gospel. One of the readings on a Lenten Sunday recently was the story of the death and then the raising from the grave of Lazarus, and this follows that story. It's from John's Gospel, the 12th chapter, and we're going to be reading the first 11 verses. 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not paid sold for 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept a common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. Amen. I've heard this quote from John's Gospel all my life. All my life. From the time that I was first aware of faith, growing up as a teenager, starting to get just little bits of glimmers about how the church operates, continuing on as an adult, as a lay member of a church, then serving as a pastor of several different churches. This story about the woman who poured out the perfume over Jesus to anoint him, and the complaint that Judas makes about, we could have spent that money on ourselves or something more important. And Jesus says, "You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." And it didn't matter if it was a fundamental church, an evangelical church, a liberal church, a progressive church. I've heard it over and over again. Anytime the church was going to spend money on something, and someone said, "Well, couldn't we help the needy? Couldn't we help the poor? Couldn't we help the people sleeping rough on the streets? Couldn't we open a food pantry?" Someone always would lean back and say, "Well, Jesus said you'll always have the poor with you," as if that absolves us of every responsibility to care for the poor, as if that means that we can spend our money, we can spend the church's money on stuff that's important to us and justify not having to care for the poor because Jesus said, that's okay. They're always there. They're always around you. Don't worry about them. What a travesty of the gospel. What a misreading of what Jesus was saying. And maybe it's because we've misunderstood what this story is about. I don't think it's really about Judas and he was getting ready to betray Jesus. I don't think it was about Judas stealing money from the purse that he held for the disciples and Jesus. I think this is a different account. Something else is going on here in John's Gospel. In the other three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's a story of Jesus having an encounter with someone who's described as a rich young man, a rich young ruler, a rich person who wants to justify himself for his lifestyle and wants to convince Jesus that even with all his riches that, he can follow Jesus and still hold on to everything. And in every case, Jesus says, you've got to let it go. You've got to get rid of the thing that's holding you back from truly being able to follow me. But that story doesn't occur in John's Gospel. Or does it? Maybe this is John's version of that encounter. Maybe this is John's understanding of someone who realizes that they can take their most precious possession. They can take their most precious, most valuable things. They can take all their money. Because if perfume cost 300 denarii, that was literally all Mary's money. Take all her money and give it to the poor. To the poor represented by Jesus. To the poor represented by this rabbi who had nowhere to lay his head. to the poor represented in this life that was continually of service to others. Maybe what this story is about is not to give us an excuse that, well, yeah, we could help the poor, but we need to buy a new organ for the church. We could help the poor, but we need to replace the carpet in the sanctuary. We could help those who are struggling in these times, these terrible, difficult, unprecedented times. But we really need to go out and buy some new technology and buy some cameras and buy some recording equipment so we can do everything online and produce massive, wonderful, beautiful, technologically perfect videos. This woman, Mary, takes everything she has, everything of value, buys this bottle of perfume and anoints Jesus with it. She anoints the poor with this gift. I think what John is saying is that here is Jesus, the poorest of the poor, the least of the least, the one who has come, setting aside glory and grace and power and might to become one of us, to become the weakest, to become the one who will be broken. We will become the one who pours out his life for us. We need to pay attention to what these stories tell us about what happened back then, as well as what these stories tell us about how we are to live now. We can hoard all the toilet paper in the world. We can gather up all the cleaning supplies. We can make sure that our refrigerators and our freezers and our pantries are stockpiled. And still Jesus looks at us and wonders, what are we going to do? Can we take some of those supplies? Can we take some of that food? Can we take some of that toilet paper? Can we take some of that pride? Can we take some of that privilege? Can we take some of that faith? Can we take some of that belief? Can we take some of that compassion? Can we take some of that love? Can we take some of that hope? Can we take some of that grace and break it open? Break our lives open, break our hearts open, break our souls open, and pour out all these gifts on those around us who truly are in need, who truly are on the verge of losing everything, who truly are facing loss of life and health and hope. Can we pour ourselves, our gifts, our perfume, our hearts, our souls to anoint the poor around us? May you go in God's grace. May you go in God's hope. And now may the peace of the rolling waves, the peace of the silent mountains, the peace of the singing stars, and the deep, deep peace of the Prince of Peace be with you now and forevermore. Amen.